Start with a Pegasus, rip its wings off, and then you can get a fire horse.
That's how Vaporeon worked, kind of.
What?
Yeah, you get this like cute little dog, and then you force feed it rocks, and it turns into a dog that's on fire.
You think it eats the rocks?
What do you think? Do you beat it to death with the rocks?
Welcome to Monsters and Multiclass, your Dungeons & Dragons fix. I'm Ellie.
I'm Jared Bornigal.
And I'm Will Milton.
And on this episode, we are taking a look at the Narzugon from Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. A devil. We haven't covered many devils, a lot of demons.
We've been
Not
super demon heavy recently.
Yeah.
And I think it's only fair to the Blood War that we cover the other side of it.
We got it, yeah. Both sides, the demon devil war. That's really important.
So the Narzugon is, as Ellie mentioned, a devil. And they're paladins, not in the sense that they're like fallen paladins, but they're paladins to the archdukes of the Nine Hells. They want, obviously, unquestioning champions to lead their legions in war. Just kind of makes sense. Archdukes don't really have time to deal with the philosophical and moral debates that might come up in a blood war that rages for centuries. But they are these hell riders. They're covered in flames and have these lances forged in hell flame. And they basically ride a devil Ponyta, the fire horse from Pokemon.
I mean, you're not wrong. And my mind went to the Warlock summon from World of Warcraft, which is basically this too. But
okay,
I like Devil Ponyta. Okay,
yeah,
Not even Rapidash.
Yep. And their lance, I guess the one thing that makes them particularly interesting is their lance, when it kills somebody, makes it so that they're reborn as a lemure. I forget if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but basically a servant in the Blood War, the lowest level of the chain. They're basically just cannon fodder that they use, which does have some mechanical implications that we'll get into. But overall, these things are cavalry. They are leading charges on the battlefield, but also carrying out the goals, the will of these archdevils. So a couple of things that we will be talking about is, of course, the stat block for the Narzugon, but also the Ponyta, the Rapidash's, the Nightmare's stat block, the horse that it rides on. It is extremely integral to the stat block, and I don't think that is made particularly clear just on the stat block itself. And then we'll be talking about the magic item that they have, the Infernal Attack, which isn't too deep, but we'll talk about it. So taking a look at the stat block, we have a medium fiend. It's a devil, and it's lawful evil, as are all devils. Has a armor class of 20. It's got plate armor and a shield. HP of 112, and then a speed of 30 feet, which really threw me off at first, because I was like, why would its speed be 30? The picture is literally it on a horse. Well, the horse has separate speed. This is just if he's off the horse for some reason.
Right. Which he should never be. Unless you kill the horse. If you kill the horse, then he'll be off the horse. Also, just since we're stopping and going through, I find its hit points really low. It's challenge rating 13.
Yes.
112
In fact, it's about half what it should be.
Yes. And
is it? Okay.
Yeah, it puts it at what, like, if you look at the challenge rating guide, 112 puts it at challenge rating 3. That is what health you'd expect. Now, of course, that is changed by its AC. Officially on the challenge rating chart, there is no AC 20. Like, it just completely loses its mind once you have an AC that high. It doesn't, like, literally challenge rating 30. It's like, oh yeah, if you're building a challenge rating 30 creature, 19 AC. Because this was put together when they just didn't know how bounded accuracy would work. I don't know. I mean, it's just percentages. I don't know.
Right.
I agree, though. That was something that really jumped out at me. It is particularly low HP. And I know the reason why, but I disagree with it. And it comes down to that one of its actions that we'll get to later. So for stats, it's pretty good. We've got a strength of 20, dex of 10, con of 17, intelligence of 16, wisdom 14, charisma 19. So no bad stats across the board. And for the ones that are bad, like dexterity being 10. It does have saving throws proficiency in that, so it's really +5 to dex saving throws, +8 to constitution saving throws, and then +9 to charisma saving throws, which I always love to see on a devil or demon, because I don't want my players banishing it like on the very first turn and just ruining my entire encounter.
Absolutely. Yeah, because banishment's not a condition, so there's very rarely any sort of immunity to it, unless they give it some sort of plane shift ability.
Right. And it's so easy for it can be easy for the players to be like, oh, I banish the biggest target on the field, and then I hide for the next minute, make sure that banishment stays, and there we go, problem solved with one spell.
This would actually double up on it too, because you would banish the Narzugon, beat the shit out of its horse, and then when he comes back, he's like, "Where's my horse?" You could
this thing that
emotionally
it wouldn't even
crushed.
come back.
Well,
unless you're on, if you're in the 9 hells, it would come back. Otherwise, it would just stay in the 9 hells.
Yeah,
but
I mean, he'd obviously come back once he finds out you beat his horse to death.
Yeah,
the long way though. You'd have to like walk, I guess.
Yeah,
and that'd probably be really, really frustrating for it too. It's be like, I hate walking. Like I bound this horse to me for a reason. Actually, that said, and I say I'm sure we'll get to it when we look at the Infernal Attack a little bit, it would be able to summon the horse to it, wouldn't it? Like if it got banished, it could be like, all right, horse, let's get out of here. If I'm going to be banished, let's both be banished, and we'll deal with that together. But going forward, we've got the +7 to perception, just to give it a chance to find your sneaky rogue, but no other skills. Damage resistance is pretty common for devils. We got acid, cold, bludgeoning, piercing, and then bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical attacks that aren't silvered. Kind of a pointless distinction when we're talking about a challenge rating 13 creature. That's more an issue I have with 5E's use of resistances and non-magical. It's like you're expected to have magic weapons by level 5, so everything after that just doesn't matter if you say it's like, oh yeah, and it has to be magical. Yeah, I have magical attacks.
Yeah, generally by this point.
And then damage immunities to fire and poison. Also very common for devils. Condition immunities, it has immune to charmed, frightened, and poisoned. Dark vision out to 120 feet, passive perception of 17, and then languages of common, infernal, and then telepathy out to 120 feet. And we have some passive abilities here. First one being Diabolical Sense. So the Narzugon has advantage on perception checks made to perceive good aligned creatures. So it has a snitch sense.
And this might be... Okay, I don't want to fully say the only one, but this is the only like ability that comes to mind in 5th edition that actively engages with the alignment system. Only protection from evil and good is not evil and good. It's like phase and fiends and undead, and
I believe the Rakshasa also has something along these lines. But it's very uncommon. Definitely rare. You're correct. Yeah.
I say we're starting a new campaign. I have a new character. I didn't even stop to consider what their alignment is. Like I made the character, and here's who they are.
I didn't even ask anybody. I don't think we've thought about it for almost 2 or 3 campaigns now. It's an afterthought. It's I'm okay with that. But that's obviously its own conversation.
Right, until you throw a Narzugon at us, and it's like, oh no, who's good aligned? Now we have to have that philosophical
Everyone
discussion.
Looks away. Oh, yeah. We're feeling pretty neutral today.
Yeah, that'd be a great time for everyone to find out, though. It's just like, I'm actually chaotic evil, and everyone's like, you're what? Y'all didn't notice? Then, as mentioned, it has its Infernal Attack, which they just put in as I guess a passive, so to speak, but it's more just to say that they have the Infernal Attack. They've got some spurs that go jingle, jangle, jingle, and it allows them to summon a fire horse. Yeah, and that one's a little bit weird. Yeah, if they either click their heels together or they drag their heels through blood. Those are the 2 ways they can summon the horse.
Okay, somehow I missed that. I didn't see the dragon heels through blood.
Yeah, it's the second thing it says. It's a nightmare equipped with the Infernal Attack. What is it? You can use your action to call a nightmare equipped with Infernal Attack by clashing the spurs together or scraping them through blood.
Okay. Those are two very different extremes, and one's a lot harder to do.
Right? It's this idea there's just blood lying on the ground.
Right.
And
Well, then again, around this thing, probably.
sure, I guess my issue with it is, do you need like a reason for it at all? Just say like as an action, you can use the spurs to summon it. It's like it's trying to give these visuals, and one, as you said, is very easy to do. The other one is like, I hope there's pools of blood around because this
Right.
moment's gonna be real cool. Like the DM could have just said that.
Right.
Drags it through and summons the horse.
Oh, whatever. They're adding a little flavor. It's fine.
It's yes, you're right. Do we want to talk about the Infernal Attack now, or
I mean, sure.
okay?
There's not
So
too much to it.
no, there's really not. I mean, the overall idea is that it's it's tack. It's got bridle, bit, reins, saddle, stirrups, and spurs. I don't know what bridle or bits are. I'm
They're
not
the stuff that
very
go
well
around the
cultured.
horse's head, and
Okay.
then the bit is what goes in their mouth.
Okay, perfect. Oh, bit.
Yeah.
They bite it. Yeah. All right. Makes a lot of sense. As mentioned, it takes an action to summon it, and then the nightmare, which is the horse that we've been talking about, appears at the start of their next turn within 20 feet of them. Acts as an ally, takes its turn on your initiative count, and then it remains for 1 day until you or it dies, or you can dismiss it as an action. If the nightmare dies, it reforms in the 9 hells within 24 hours, after which you can summon it again. It does specify the attack doesn't conjure a nightmare from thin air. You need to actually subdue and basically break a horse first with the Infernal Attack in order to claim it, and not just any horse. Like it has to be a nightmare.
Yeah.
I mean, it might work with other horses. It's just probably not an efficient way to saddle your horse.
No. In terms of mechanical use, I feel like if you're going to be using this creature, the Narzugon, it doesn't make sense to wait until combat starts to call the horse. Just from a DM perspective, that'd be using an entire action just to get the horse out for very little benefit. It can just have the horse.
Yeah, it's like it's iconic to this thing to be on a horse, their nightmare steed. It would be like the Headless Horseman of Sleepy Hollow. Like
Hold on a
book,
moment.
Shows up, shows up on foot, and then like hold on, and 10 seconds later mounts a horse that appeared. Like no, they're just on the horse.
Yeah, and that's it. That's the long and short of the magic item. I guess there's something to be said about your party being able to get access to this. It's kind of evil. It's like I feel like they haven't played up the nightmare part of the pun enough, or of the name. Like it's obviously a pun, but they don't mention it at all. Nightmare, yeah. But
and if it was a attack where like you got it and then it created a nightmare, sure. Like well, you party get in, and but like they have to go and find one and then subdue it with this, which is this really hard process, anyways. It feels like your party's just gonna kind of like leave it on the ground.
Yeah, most likely they are. That said, if you have a party who is into it, I mean, okay, you've got something there, and mechanically, it's not like the item is ridiculously powerful or anything. The nightmare itself is pretty strong, and I guess like I don't want to be too broad and say like, oh yeah, this is pointless to give your party. Like, there's some people who honestly would love the opportunity to be like, yes, I've got my devil horse. This is the coolest thing ever, and that's fine. Like, go for it. Here's a way to give it to them. That's the entire quest. Is your party finds out that there are devil horses, nightmares, and so they have to kill a Narzugon, take the tack, and then break a horse in order to actually to get it, which means they have to roll animal handling checks on a devil horse.
And once everybody sees how cool this horse is, the entire party is going to want one. So it's going to become this like assassination squad trying to steal this guy's horse.
Going into the 9 hells to kill Narzugons. They find out they upset the balance of the blood war and the demons are starting to win, and now they have to deal with that.
March with their nightmares against the demons.
Right. They kick off
With
the
the
entire
devils,
events
okay.
of Out of the Abyss. Oh man. All right. So yeah, then next on the passive abilities, we've got one left. It does have magic resistance, so advantage on saving throws against spells and other magical effects, which I do like a lot as a DM because it really stinks when, an entire fight just falls away because of one spell or something. That said, I don't see this thing failing too much, but even before having advantage on all of these, but I
Mhm.
don't know. It's definitely makes it more powerful.
Yeah, it's always appreciated.
It does feel like a common theme of this creature though is it's like 80% of the way there to being a legendary creature. Like it's just
Mhm.
right on the edge, and we'll talk about it with the actions, but I'll say this is kind of one of the more complicated actions setups, and I'm almost wondering if this was like they're like on the fence, like should we just make this a legendary creature? And like, well, if it's legendary, people will think it's this big boss, but I think the way that I would almost run it is as a legendary creature, but we'll talk about that more, I'm sure.
Sure.
Getting into the actions, we have multi-attack. So the Narzugon uses its Infernal Command or Terrifying Command, and it also makes 3 Hellfire Lance attacks. Yes, the aforementioned Hellfire Lance is what is able to once killing somebody, send them to the 9 hells to be reborn as a Lemure. It is a melee weapon attack, plus 10 to hit, reach of 10 feet, and it does 1d12 plus 5 piercing damage, which I believe is the normal for a lance, plus 3d10 fire damage. And if this damage kills a creature, the creature's soul rises from the river Styx as a Lemure in Avernus in 1d4 hours. If the creature isn't revived before then, only a wish spell or killing the Lemure and casting True Resurrection on the creature's original body can restore it to life. Construction devils are immune to this effect.
So if the lance kills a creature, wording's odd. Usually this stuff is like if it drops it to 0 hit points.
Yep.
But like PCs generally get death saves, so it will drop it to 0 hit points. They'll roll death saves. Let's say they failed their death saves. Is that the lance killing them? I would
I
take that as yes, but let's
Yeah,
say
I
they
agree.
fall down, they roll a failed death save, and then another creature comes up and whacks them, and the other two. Is that still the lance?
No, that's not the lance then. I
It's weird.
it's super weird. I agree. The one thing that I think to get around this, even as a conversation, is that this is a creature that's going to finish their kills because it
Okay,
knows how to set that. Like that's its whole point, right? I take
right.
the lance, I stab things, and then when they die, I send them to Avernus. That's my whole thing. So when it
Right.
drops somebody to 0, I don't think it's stopping. It is finishing off its kill.
That's
Um,
fair.
but otherwise, yes, it's it's super weird mechanically, and usually you do
Right.
see that once you hit 0, the creature automatically dies or something like that.
Right.
I feel like if I were to reword this though, I would say if the damage drops a creature to 0 HP and it dies, then all of that happens. Just getting around it. So it's saying the lance dropped
Just
them
if
to
it
0.
dies ever in its life. It's a weird phrasing. I'm using
You're right.
died. Though I see why they did it because if this was drop someone to 0, it just happens. That's really intense.
Yes.
That's hard to get around because it attacks 3 times in a turn, and they're pretty heavy attacks. Usually, those other things where if it's dropped to 0, it's kind of like this rider effect that happens in addition to something else, or this whole other action, and you kind of see it coming. This one is just like it's its basic weapon attack, does it?
Yeah, that said, it's not preventing you from getting around death in the usual ways. If you drop to 0 HP, and somebody heals you back up to, I don't know, 10 HP or whatever, you still get up. Nothing's stopping you there. You're not dead. And if you do die, as long as somebody in the party has Revivify or any of those types of spells, they're able to bring you back pretty quickly. This
Mm-hmm.
is kind of party dependent because of that. If you've got a party that doesn't have access to resurrection magic, it can be a problem. If you have a party that relies on gentle repose for these situations, this doesn't seem to get around that.
No.
So there's no, I'll cast gentle repose and bring them into town and we'll revive them there. So, to some extent, you got to be, I don't know if careful is the right word, but just be cognizant of it. Make sure
Right.
if you're killing a PC with this, you could be really, really killing them based on your party makeup.
Right.
Then next up, we've got the Infernal Command ability. So once again, to recap, it is able to use this Infernal Command and this next action that we get to, as well as make these Hellfire attacks. It is not an either or.
It is an or. Infernal Command or Terrifying Command.
That's not what I meant. I mean, it can do one of these commands and
right,
it can do
and
the
then
lance
the
attacks.
Hellfire. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. We're on the same page.
The Infernal Command is each ally of the Narzugon within 60 feet of it can't be charmed or frightened until the end of the Narzugon's next turn.
That one's weird. I don't know why it's there. Like,
It
generally
doesn't make sense until you read the next one, and then it still kind of doesn't make sense.
Right. I would say, because this thing usually is going to be fighting with devils, which are fiends, and those are usually immune to being charmed anyways.
I looked into that. It's kind of all over the place. The higher level devils are almost all exclusively immune to charmed and frightened. The lower level
Right.
ones, though, it depends. So to that extent, it's fine. This guy, though, the Narzugon itself, is immune to charmed and frightened. The Nightmare,
Right.
though, is not.
Sure,
So
that's true.
So this, in a way, in one way, in a singular way, this is its way of calming its horse easily. As for the rest of the allies, though, I think this is very, like, you might end up using this in the fight one time. My question was, though, is it says they can't be charmed or frightened until the end of the Narzugon's next turn. If they already are charmed or frightened, does it end the condition or does it suppress it for a turn? Because it doesn't say it ends the charmed or frightened condition. It says they can't be charmed or frightened. And that's just like a rule interaction I don't see very often. I don't see this phrasing very often.
I guess what I would say, though, is what we're talking about, like the charmed and frightened conditions, they come up, but not universally.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas its next ability, which does cause the frightened condition, but doesn't do it to its friends.
Correct.
So it seems like it synergizes, because the end of the next turn thing, that is weird, and I don't understand it until you see that it can then do a terrifying command and terrify everybody. So it protects its allies.
But it's already able to protect its allies.
I know.
Well, it can protect fiends.
Okay, sure. All right.
And
Well,
so,
let me read the
if-
next part.
Yeah.
I'll read the terrifying
I don't know why
command so we can-
non-fiends will be fighting with this, but
Yeah. And we'll come back to that stumper. So terrifying command is each creature that isn't a fiend within 60 feet of the Narzugon that can hear it must succeed on a DC 17 charisma saving throw or become frightened of it for 1 minute. Each creature can repeat the saving throw at the end of each of its turns, ending the effect on itself on a success. The creature that makes a successful saving throw is immune to the terrifying command for 24 hours. So yeah, I guess if it's fighting with something that isn't a fiend, great. I also feel like it should have specified fiend devils, because if this thing is fighting in the Blood War, its terrifying command is entirely useless against demons.
right. Which thematically I could see that. Demons are something I don't see getting frightened.
Sure.
Yeah, they're
think that
also
might be
immune to
just
their
a
damage
standard-
types too. It's just, that's why it's such a shitty
Yeah.
war. It's like water versus water. It doesn't work.
Right.
Yeah, also I
So-
think most demons are just immune to the frightened condition anyways.
Yeah, that sounds right. So I'm still not getting this infernal command ability, or like how it's really supposed to play out. Terrifying command, I'll say, is fine. It's a good use. The fact that you basically get to use it for free makes for a good way to harm a party, of course, because everyone being frightened is not good. DC 17
Right.
charisma saving throw is very high.
Yeah. And this is the frightened where you have disadvantage if the thing that's frightening you is within line of sight. a disadvantage on ability checks and attack rolls, and then you can't willingly move closer to it. It's that frame. This isn't the fear where you have to drop everything and run away. Just to
Correct.
specify.
All right, I have an idea.
Yeah, it's very. Go on.
So, like we were talking about how this is not an Oathbreaker Paladin at the very beginning. This is very much like a Nega-Paladin. You take everything you had with your Paladin beliefs and you shift it onto a devil, essentially, as opposed to abandoning your oath. So I could see maybe recruiting semi-evil Paladin interns.
Semi-evil. They're working their way towards full evil.
Yeah.
Okay. So in that case, yes, it may have some companions that get frightened. I still don't know if that makes Infernal Command make sense to me. Especially, again, looking at kind of the wording. Would you just like prepare it? You do Infernal Command first turn and you say, okay, it's till the end of my next turn, I'm not going to frighten my buddies. And that's the entire point of these two abilities, and that's their interaction.
Yeah, you use one and then the other, and then it's like, okay.
I feel like that works better as a passive ability.
Yeah, that's like a lot of setup. 2 turns to get there for something that has 100 health.
Yeah.
And that's 13.
That's the interesting part also is it does this every turn, but it's not useful almost any turn.
I was gonna say Infernal Command will start being used because it's like, well, okay, I've done my Terrifying Command. Everything is now saved. They're all immune, so I guess I'll keep popping Infernal Command, and now the rare non-fiend allies can no longer be charmed if the party happens to use a spell that charms or frightens.
Right.
So okay, you go, Narzugon. You got this.
Yeah, that's the thing. I feel like this works better as just a passive ability. If you just say it's allies within 60 feet of it can't be charmed or frightened. That's it. Done.
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot of this stat block taken up by these two abilities, and they're just ultimately this really minor thing to it.
And it's a Terrifying Command is. Terrifying Command
it's a flavorful thing, sure. But then adding in the weird interaction with Infernal Command.
I guess I'm going to get hung up on this, but you go ahead.
What?
One of us has to go.
Okay, so I'm not saying giving your whole party the frightened condition is not great. Obviously it's pretty bad for the party. But it's not encounter ruining. They can still manage. They can manage to break line of sight and things like that, and they get a free save at the end of each of its turns anyways. And there's also a whole host of PC abilities to make you immune to the frightened condition. I don't think this is going to be they do it, the entire party's frightened for the entire combat, and it's oh no, that's so much worse. It's you're going to probably get two of the party, and they're going to save in the next 2 turns and just kind of work around it until then.
That's fair. I will say this is probably one of the few times that the Bard's counter charm might actually be a worthwhile thing. Because no, you don't think so at all. If 3 people get frightened by this and they've got low charisma, and the Bard doesn't because they've got a high charisma save, so they're probably the ones who's going to succeed on this. You're saying it wouldn't be worth an action and no spell slot to give everybody advantage on their check to rid themselves of frightened, like the Barbarian, for example, who's got -1 charisma, and they're just going to keep failing.
Okay. I was thinking in the sense of on the first go of it, and it's well, you're trying to predict when it does it.
Oh, no.
Yeah, no, okay, so if everyone fails, then doing it, so then get it right. Everyone run to me and do your save.
Yes.
Is it frightened or is it just charmed?
Frightened and charmed.
Frightened or charmed. Okay, good.
It's one of the very few times that it might be worthwhile. Now, on the other hand, there's also the Calm Emotion spell that just automatically has them succeed. So
right,
your call which one's worthwhile.
Yeah, there's other spells too. It's and in addition to this other cool stuff, you're also immune to being frightened.
Mm-hmm. So yeah,
I think heroism, right? Yeah. And that's a first level spell.
But can you cast that on everybody? And is heroism touch?
Yes, it is touch. It's concentration for a minute. I mean, so it's
Yeah, it might be hard to justify because you got to concentrate on it and whatever else. But regardless, I'm not saying that counter charm is
Yeah.
good. I'm saying this is the one scenario where I'm like, oh, okay, counter charm might come in handy here.
Right. That's another weird rules interaction. Until the spell ends, the creature is immune to being frightened and concentration for a minute. So if they're frightened and you cast it on them, does it just end? Or
I
after the
think
minute does
so.
come back, do they get to keep rolling their saves while not being frightened? And if they happen to do a minute of failed saves,
Yeah, that's really what
that's
my
yeah,
question around Infernal Command comes down to is does saying that you can't be charmed or frightened. Actually, even then it says you can't be charmed or frightened. Does that mean if you're already charmed or frightened, it doesn't prevent it? I don't get it, and I feel like I'm missing something. So that's going to be
I mean,
my...
you're not. It's just kind of not well worded. I just think the intent is you're not charmed and frightened when you're being infernally commanded.
I think I would probably
Yeah.
just run it where it removes it. If they have the charmed or frightened condition, it's gone now. That's this thing. But as I said, I would just take that out as an action entirely and just make it a passive ability and call it a day.
Man, I wish paladins had like some kind of area of effect passive ability. That'd be so cool.
That'd be really fitting for a devil paladin, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. But hey, feel free to leave your thoughts on it in the comments, or let us know on Twitter or Reddit. Twitter's @monsters_multi or @monsters in multiclass, wherever you'd like to. Let us know how you feel about the Infernal Command ability and what you make of it. One more action, and this is where I was saying I think this is why its health is so low, and I disagree with it. It has healing once a day. The Narzugon or one creature it touches regains up to 100 hit points. So it has the ability to add an extra 100 hit points to itself or something it's commanding as long as it's within touch range. So realistically, it's going to heal itself, but unless it's at 12 HP, a lot of that is going to be wasted healing. So it's almost like it's expecting you to have a bigger demon with more, a bigger devil with more health around that it can heal. I don't really get what this is going
That's
for.
a naughty idea. Because nightmares can fly.
They can, yes. So if it's like commanding the battlefield.
Swarms of them just like slapping down on the big greater devil.
Right. It definitely is a way of keeping them up. And I'm sure that could actually be an entire level 20 interaction, is nightmares and Narzugons flying around healing up a very powerful devil, like an what was the Balrog? I forget what they call them in D&D. I always mix it up. Okay.
Is it not Balrog in D&D?
No, there's the Lord of the Rings one.
Pit Fiend's the one.
The Baelor.
The Baelor's the
Balrog.
Baelor,
Pit Fiend
right?
is what you're...
Yeah, Balrog, yeah. No, Baelor's in... Maybe it's not.
This is so frustrating. They couldn't have just gone with like a totally separate name.
Right.
But either way, you all know what I'm talking about. The giant fire devil thing.
No, the Baelor's the demon.
Baelor's a demon?
Yeah, the Pit Fiend. Pit Fiend.
Ugh.
I hate this. Okay, Pit Fiend.
Okay, you're correct. All right. So, good correction, Will. The Pit Fiend is just sitting there and soaking up these heals as needed. And maybe, the party focuses on taking out the Narzugons first because that's what they need to do. But if you're just fighting the Narzugon, I would take away this ability and just give it 100 extra health.
I was going to say, with a challenge rating 13, about 112 health. I don't know what I said about. Exactly 112 health. It's like, so that's going to get really low in probably one round, assuming the party's focus firing on it. And then it's like, oh, shit, it's low. Let me heal myself. That's its entire action. It does nothing else. And it gets back up to full. And then the party just spends the next round focus firing on it. And it's like, okay, nothing really happened. It still died. It survived an extra round. But it still died. It didn't get to do anything. It should just have the 212 health. I'm
Precisely. And if you're going to do something where it's able to heal its allies, I just feel like there's better ways to do it. I mean, I guess it is trying to be like lay on hands, isn't it? That's what it's trying to mirror.
I
Again, it's
guess.
paladin stuff.
They really screwed this up. They did a ton of stuff that makes it almost paladin-like, but they
Mhm.
just did not go all the way in.
Right, because if this was a pool of 100 points, not once per day it can heal 100 hit points, then okay, now I see it able to heal the horse up. You know, oh, you dropped the
Mhm.
horse down to 60 or to 8 HP. Boom, I'm gonna bring it all the way back up. Oh, you dropped it again. I'm healing it back up again. But they probably figured, oh, that's too much for a DM to handle. Which fair enough. I mean, I don't want to manage pools of healing that it can deal, but it just doesn't have a great execution.
Right.
So
See, yeah,
yeah,
definitely some weirdness with this one.
and it's in Mordenkainen's too, which surprises me because usually we talk about how great Mordenkainen monsters are and how much better designed they are, and
Mhm.
I'm loving the concept of this one, but there's just like some tweaks to make, some hurdles to jump over as a DM to make it a legitimately good fight.
Right.
And there's even one bigger issue above all of this. Now that we're done with the stat block, talking about some ways to use this in a fight. This thing is a lancer. It's a cavalryman, and the fight, based on what we have here, is going to be horsey man running up to you, and then standing there, and then stabbing, because it has no way of getting out of your range without taking opportunity attacks.
Yeah,
So
it's the
it's
same issue as like the Armanith.
Yep, which we just talked
Armanite?
about, of course. Yeah,
Whatever. Yeah,
Armanites.
whatever. Yeah, there's the links up at the top. Armanite, that's it. There's no H in there. Yeah, it's almost kind of like these are like the devil's answer to that. You have the demon cavalry, this is the devil cavalry.
Totally intentional. We should just have like an accidental Blood War playlist on our YouTube. Yeah, so I mean, and that was definitely an issue we talked about on there as well. Is, I mean, this idea that if you run it just as written here, they run up, they stand still, they attack, they're strong, sure, they're going to deal some damage, but it's not what you expect fighting somebody who's on horseback.
Right.
I guess one thing to note is it does have 10 feet reach, which is not, it's kind of helpful in this situation, but
You're
it's
right.
not massively.
Yeah, I still think that you could add an ability of some sort, which I think we did this with the Armanite as well, talked about it, that if it gets a hit on a creature, then it can keep moving and not provoke opportunity attacks.
Right.
And to me, that entirely changes this fight from a standard D&D monster to an extremely interesting, unique, dynamic battle that now has tons of choices that need made. Because if this thing is running across the battlefield and hitting 3 people with its lance, not provoking opportunity attacks, atop its nightmare with a 90-foot flying speed, then it is able to be wherever it wants on the battlefield. Basically, only your ranged attackers are going to get a good handle on attacking it. And then all
Right.
of your melee combatants have a lot of choices to make. You know, am I going to stand my ground and hold my action to take a single attack against it? Am I going to try and run up to it, or are we going to try and corner it in order to shove him off the horse or
Right.
grapple it or whatever?
Or try
Just
and focus on killing the horse.
exactly. Which is going to be way too easy because it has 60 HP.
And 13 AC.
Yeah. Give it barding. Give it
Yeah.
plate armor. Give your horse plate armor.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, I think again, it's just that like one little thing that you can add, just if it hits, and yeah, sometimes it's just going to take the opportunity attack because it misses one of its attacks. Fine, but if it hits, does damage on a creature, it is able to continue its movement and not provoke opportunity attack. Or you could play the game of trying to stay 10 feet away and never getting within reach of him.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. So in terms of reasons to use this, I guess there's a whole bunch. I mean, if any time you would be fighting devils, this thing can come out.
Sure.
It kind of commands the battlefield, so it can absolutely kind of be the boss for a mid-level campaign. Though I think as like an end boss as is, that would be kind of lackluster. but like as a kind of
Yeah.
a big set piece fight of a whole bunch of different devils, and then this thing commanding them, flying around, 90 feet up in the air.
Definitely a time to take a look at that action oriented monsters. Just give it some more things to do. Make it a
Right.
legendary. I mean, it's I feel like it's a good template for a lot of abilities, but yeah, probably wouldn't run it as is for like a big boss fight.
Right.
Something I was thinking is, as it is a paladin, obviously meeting it on the battlefield is one option. Realistically, that just doesn't come up a ton in D&D games, but carrying out the will of archdevils is definitely something that your party would probably oppose. So just a scenario of the archdevils require an artifact that will grant them the upper hand in the blood war, and it sends this as well as a team of devils out to obtain that artifact. Your party gets wind of it and needs to stop it. So that's a time where it's not going to be on the battlefield, but you might have a chance of fighting it in more condensed, realistic D&D combat. And that can just be extrapolated anytime that there's like, the archdevils want to do something or whatever, just hand wave it and say blood war.
Right. Yeah, honestly, yeah. There's a lot of unknowing motives for devils and demons.
Yeah, that's even better. Is just have it show up as a random encounter, and the party's like, "Why was this here?" And you're like, "Oh, I don't know. I just rolled on the random encounter table. Blood War is the Blood War."
Right.
Blood War is eternal.
As is, it does make a decent kind of mid-tier type fight. Not a boss, but it's not like the cannon fodder. If you look at it in like a video gamey term, they're like the lieutenants that show up. Like, you got a lot of little cannon fodder guys in a big fight. I'm kind of thinking of like Doom. And then there's like a couple of the big, heavier hitting, harder to kill demons. This is one of those.
Right.
They're not a boss. They're not meant to like tax your character at the end, but they take some resources. Their presence makes things a little scarier.
Yes. Yeah, I think the issue that it runs across is, as I've said a couple times now, the fact that it's like part way to being a legendary creature, it gives you the feeling that this should be a boss because it has such a dense stat block with what feels like a lot going on. And if
Mhm.
you just want to use it like that as just a mid-tier enemy, then simplifying the stat block I think will make your life a lot easier and get the same feeling across. As we mentioned, giving that 100 HP boost instead of this weird healing aspect is easy. Making that one ability a passive instead of trying to remember, oh, is this going to be useful right now? It's like you just it's done,
Right.
and take away that extra thinking that I think is added when a creature feels like a boss.
Right.
We didn't go over the nightmare yet.
Yeah, I
So
think we could just kind of briefly cover that one.
yes, yeah. So
It's
the horse that it has, I mean, again, it's integral to the fight itself. We've talked about it briefly, but give those stats. Just a 13 AC, HP of 68. It's got high strength and otherwise good stats. I'm not going to read those all off. It's
yeah.
immune
Well,
to
you skipped the
fire.
important bit. The speed, 60-foot
Oh,
walking speed, 90-foot fly speed.
yeah. Yes, that's extremely important. The fly speed of 90 is just absurd.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, for damage immunities, it's immune to fire. And it can speak common and infernal, or sorry, it can understand common and infernal. Very important. Something that's neat is it has this confer fire resistance. So anybody that's riding it, it can grant fire resistance to. Obviously doesn't come up in this fight, but if you do go the route of having your party tame one of these creatures,
Right.
when they're riding it, they have resistance to fire. It sheds bright light and dim light, of course, and then it has its hooves attack, where it can +6 to hit, reach of 5 feet, does 2d8 +4 bludgeoning damage, and 2d6 fire damage. So that's pretty good.
Yeah.
And then lastly, and this might actually come up in your combat potentially, is Ethereal Stride. The nightmare and up to 3 willing creatures within 5 feet of it magically enter the ethereal plane from the material plane or vice versa.
Yeah. which is neat. It's so the mounting rules make this one weird because based on mounting, it's like when you're the I don't know, I'm completely blanking the name. Narzugon is riding it, and it makes the decision of it's either letting the nightmare act on its own, and then it gets all of these actions, and it's like any other creature, but they just share movement, or it controls it, and then the nightmare doesn't get these actions. The Narzugon just has the increased speed of being on the nightmare. So raw, most likely, like the Narzugons wanted to run in and lance things and get away and things like that. The nightmare is then not going to have any of these actions, and it doesn't matter. It just has decent hit points and imparts a really high speed to the Narzugon.
So
I wouldn't run it that way. I think I'd allow the Narzugon to replace one of the lance attacks with its hoof attack, with a nightmare hoof attack, um, and then allow it to. It seems too strong to just say allow to always have the Ethereal stride.
what do you mean by always have it? Like just it can
Like
do it
they
when it
just say it
wants?
could always just do it. But then maybe not because it can't really interact with anything if it's in the ethereal
Yeah,
plane. So
that's where I mean the ethereal plane just becomes like it can be an interesting way for it to get around situations, but I don't think
right,
it's going to be used all the time. For example, if it wanted to get around a wall of force or something like that, and pop behind on the other side, or whatever your party does to try and break up its movement, it has
hmm
a way around it and can set up in the position that it wants to be in.
right,
I think it's worth noting that the independent movement works particularly well for the Nightmare Narzugon because this is an intelligent creature. So the Narzugon can be like, hey, Nightmare Buddy, you're going to do this on your turn independently. And it
right.
can hoof attack, and the Narzugon can lance attack. And it's basically, you lose nothing by letting the Nightmare act independently.
Yeah, that is a weird one because then it's by the DM then, so it's the DM controlling all of it, and it's like, can you really justify the nightmare having its own will separate from the Narzugon that it's not going to go where the Narzugon wants it to go? Like if a player's doing that, then the DM kind of controls the horse. Well, the player controls themselves on top of it, and so there's a difference there, and it could end up biting you. Not literally,
Yeah.
but you know what I mean.
No, it doesn't
Or
have a bite
literally.
attack.
Yeah.
The Infernal Attack does somewhat address this. I think it says it acts as your ally and it takes its turn on your initiative count. So it's not like a separate initiative. So it's very
Right.
much like it feels like it is just entirely under your control and
Yeah.
operates however you want it to and whatever is in both of your best interests.
Right. Yeah, that is probably the best way to run it. Allow it to have its own, all of it, its actions and everything, and its own movement, but it matches what the Narzagon wants to do, anyways.
Right. And if you're taking your turn on the same initiative, it basically means it's an extension of you.
Right.
Where if you want it to move and then attack and then you make your lance attacks, like, I don't know. I don't see any reason why you couldn't just merge them
Right.
together.
Yeah, I
Which
agree.
does make it super, super strong. From like, that's why we're saying I would never give this to you guys in a game, and I doubt you'd give it to me if
Right.
you were DMing. But if you're in a game where this seems fun to you, be aware of what it's doing to the action economy.
Giving someone an Infernal Attack
Yes.
and then
Or a
access to a
nightmare. Yeah.
nightmare. Well,
Yes.
okay. So yeah, we were talking about that earlier. So there is a created nightmare thing. We were talking about, oh, and then you have to somehow go and find one. That's actually not how it works. That would be nice if that's how it works. They don't exist naturally in the multiverse. They need to be created from a Pegasus. And
I
the
just
ritual
read
to
it.
create a nightmare requires the torturous removal of a Pegasus wings, driving the noble creature to evil, and is transformed by dark magic. So it's much worse than just like, oh, I kind of tamed this somewhat evil horse. It's like, no, I had to like torture a Pegasus into evil and then enslaved it to my will. It's like, it's an evil magic item. It is an evil thing to do. So
This
sure, there
is
are parties that definitely pull it off, but like your good aligned party fighting hunting down devils, like don't tempt them with the evil tax. Like don't expect them to take that or something. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. No, that almost feels like something that as a DM you do put in front of your party and like you explain to them, they do the research. They go to the library and they say, "How is a nightmare created? We need to get one." And you explain it like expecting them to be like, "Okay, that's too far for us. We're not going to do it. And they just look at each other like, well, where's a Pegasus? Like, what do we got to do? No, this wasn't what I wanted.
I go to the bone saw shop. What? No.
Oh, man. And I was getting the visual of that Dogma, that movie.
Dogma,
where,
did you say?
Ben Affleck
yes.
has his wings ripped off.
Yep.
And it has those weird little stumps. Like,
Yep.
anyways. Yeah, I wouldn't ever offer this. The Infernal Attack disappears.
Yeah.
End of story. Oh, man. All right. Anything else that we got around this?
No, I got nothing else.
Okay. It's just like not the evolution chain that I expected in Pokemon. Start with a Pegasus, rip its wings off, and then you can get a fire horse.
That's how Vaporeon worked, kind of.
What?
Yeah. You get this like cute little dog, and then you force feed it rocks, and it turns into a dog that's on fire.
You think it eats the rocks?
What do you think? Do you beat it to death with the rocks?
Slight correction. Flareon was the fire one for Eevee. Vaporeon was the water one. Just somebody's gonna get mad at us for not getting that correct. Just like people get mad at us when we don't mention our sponsors, the Crafty Gamers. They just go into the comments, they yell, they scream, and they say, I want to buy candles and soaps and t-shirts that have my hobby theme to them, but I can't because I don't know the code. And then I gotta tell them in the comments, it's MM10. Use the code MM10 and you can get 10% off your entire order. So, no more rage this time, I told you.
That's a pretty good one. You're getting better.
Thanks. I'm trying. It's an uphill battle. All right, and that is the end of the episode. If you enjoyed what you listened to, then make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all of those things wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube. And as usual, thank you so much to our patrons, Ed G, Muddawait, Brian H, Craig A, Isaac M, Jet W, Luca L, Star Shinobi, Vincent M, Bob F, Joe P, Rick D, Sensible D20, Adam A, and Rob K. Thank you all so much for supporting the show. And if you want to support the show, you can head on over to our Patreon, which I'm sure there's links on our website, monstersmulticlass.com. Where you can normally, like 95% of the time, get access to the episodes at least a day early. That is the specificity that you come here for. Most of the time, you get it at least 1 day earlier. Sometimes you get it 2 days earlier. But the point is,
and
you're in an
sometimes
exclusive
it's
club.
Not early because I'm behind on editing.
Yep.
It's more about just supporting the show. The early release is a cherry.
Say the line. End it. Save us.
Okay, yeah. Thanks for, as always, thanks for watching.
Did we have that donation option? Give us $1,000 a month, we'll stop making podcasts. Try and bait that out of somebody.